Neuroscience for All of Us, plus Lisa Crone's Writer Guidelines. And it delves into the complexities of the brain. Ever since civilization's earliest writings found in the Golden Age of Greece, philosophers and scientists have ascribed mystical qualities to the brain. The Greeks thought the brain had three invisible pieces, the id, ego, and superego, but they had no tools to look inside the skull. Their best conjectures invented the mind-brain duality, comprising a spirit linking the ideal to the physical world. Not until the Renaissance did mankind's awareness move much further, but progress accelerated in the 20th century when the Enlightenment's scientific revolution spurred new disciplines, namely neuroscience and psychology. And since then, scientists have stunned the world via the tools that let them actually penetrate into the brain. Our latest research pretty much confirms there is no mind-brain duality. The mind equals the brain. The brain describes how we sense the world about us. The mind explains our emotions and cognition. How does the brain work? Well, the brain has billions of neurons forming trillions of interneural connections that store information captured in neurochemical levels and electric currents. Each moment, these properties put our brains in different states, which are constantly shifting. We live our lives moment by moment in these mental states. There is no ethereal spirit or point in the brain where thinking and feeling exist. Cognition and emotion are emergent properties of this entire assemblage of interneural connections. But even the most rationally calculating person among us pauses when confronting the reality that we are merely brains, nothing more than clumps of neurons grouped into the hippocampus, limbic, and neocortical collections controlled by internal and external signals. Most people like to believe we are more than just that. The ancient Greeks and their pre-Socratic philosophers and scientists believed that men are more than mere animals. Yes, people desire food and drink and sex and sleep, but men use their uniquely human gift of language to transcend animals and to build a society that gives primacy to the state and its citizens and its political governance instead of the individual. Mankind will become its own God. As expected, the depressing findings of neuroscience and catastrophic 20th century man-made events led to philosophical offshoots like nihilism and existentialism, associated with prominent philosophers such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Soren Kierkegaard. 20th century writers reacted as well. For example, Nobel Prize winning Albert Camus, he won the Nobel Prize in the 50s, wrote a series of novels, The Stranger, The Plague, and The Fall are his most famous. And these novels showcase man's alienation, absurdity, and meaningless existence. Well, I have watched videos and read books explaining the latest developments in neuroscience and psychology. Here are three of the books published in 2022 that I read during the last couple of months. And let me summarize some of what the books say. The first, Freely Determined, What the New Psychology of the Self Teaches Us About How to Live, is written by Kenan Sheldon. He contends that people want to believe they have free will, which means we can make our own decisions instead of having everything we do predetermined, like the cause and effect mechanistic world modern science might predict. He says we'll be happier pretending that we do have a separate mind that holds some type of invisible spirit that is true, is the true us, even though this spiritual homunculus leads to an impossible infinite regress. And that goes like this. If we hear a voice speaking to us, that's the little homunculus in our head, well, what's speaking to it? And so on ad infinitum. The author's advice is to ignore this logical inconsistency, and we should go about our daily life following the universal ethical guidelines everyone knows about. The next book, Subliminal, How Your Unconscious Mind Rules Your Behavior, that's by Leonard Mlodinow. It describes a two-tiered brain containing conscious and unconscious pieces. He says that much that we do is controlled by our unconsciousness. Well, there's a better book that covers all of this. It's the book Thinking, Fast and Slow, written by prize winner Daniel Kahneman. Thinking fast is our intuitive, unconscious part. Thinking slow is our rational part. As we go through life, we must guard against some of the errors our unconscious self might make. And the third book is The Self-Delusion, the new neuroscience of how we invent and reinvent ourselves. According to this book, our brain state invents and reinvents itself moment to moment. And the author describes how by using 5 points of view. The first is epistemology. That's the branch of philosophy dealing with how we know things. Well, we know things by either thinking or by experiencing. The second is compression. The brain has to compress all our experiences into a sequence of what it remembers. The third is prediction. Our brains are designed to carry out its prime directive, which is to survive long enough to pass our genes to the next generation. Evolution has equipped our brains with the cognitive ability to plan, so we survive, at least to the next day. The fourth is dissociation. When we look in the mirror, we see ourselves and believe that we are separate from the universe, separate from other people. We stand alone in the world and must learn to work with others and empathize with them. That is why we are social animals. The whole of humanity is greater than the sum of its parts. And the fifth is narration. We are born storytellers. Prehistoric man must have told stories to others while sitting around the campfire. The stories entertained and educated, and we do the same today, even though we are supposedly smarter and more sophisticated. And yes, we are more sophisticated because we have developed better technologies and learned more. But our brains and those of the cavemen are pretty much the same. Well, this last piece makes for a segue to what I'd like to summarize regarding 2 books for writers and authors. They are Wired for Story and Story Genius, written by Lisa Crone. She is often mentioned in writing seminars because she links writing guidelines to neuroscience. Here are some of the takeaways. She says that because our brains are wired to hear stories, we can hook the reader if we can make the first line of chapter 1 grab the reader's interest and write in a style that makes the reader keep turning pages. We do this by having characters readers empathize with and have a storyline plot that shows how the protagonist deals with life's problems. And our brains contain mirror neurons. When we are reading a novel, they fire and evoke the same feelings the book's protagonists and characters have. And the words we write should show and tell what the brain needs to know. That's what the brain scans tell neuroscientists when the neuroscientists study people's brains. And there must be a theme or message and a goal, because our brains always look for them no matter what it is doing. And the brain likes concrete rather than abstract notions. So authors and writers should write that way. Our brains always look for patterns leading to cause and effect. So have this in your book. In real life, the brain wants to avoid conflict, but when reading, it loves the emotional thrills conflict gives. Now, the current generation of readers shares a common trait with all preceding ones. It likes current writing style conventions. Today, readers like to see the action rather than be told about what's happening. And they don't want to be bored by too much backstory or description. And they like shorter rather than longer chapters because they give convenient stopping points when interruptions come calling. They also want to see character flaws because no one is perfect. Lisa Krone's other novel, Story Genius, applies the same neuroscience concepts and presents the steps a writer can take to produce a written work of genius. These steps are pretty much common sense, and I won't dwell on the obvious, but please read the book if you want to hear her words. And that'll do it for this podcast. I hope you find it helpful. There's much more in each book, so please read them if you'd like to hear more from the authors. And I will say bye-bye for now. Okay, let us find the screen I was working from. And I am going to click the End Live Video button. John Kane of Prime Solutions and his people, along with those of Facebook and YouTube, will take it and make it better. Okay, thanks again for listening, and bye-bye till next time.